Ellison in studio today, live with my brother. Pastor Hobbs is in here engineering. Thank you, sir. Dr. Bradley is off today. He's been texting, though. He's down with taking care of some family business this week. And we want to thank our sponsor, Guaranteed Rate Mortgage Company. For all your mortgage needs, give branch manager Cora Holbrook a call at area code 781-342-0252. Guaranteed Mortgage is located at 75 State Street in downtown Boston, Mass. Guaranteed Rate Mortgage Company, guaranteed to exceed your expectations. We have we're standing by on the line. We're going to get to them in a second. Folks, mass shootings here. We've had more mass shootings this year than we've had days. That says a lot about this country, right? We have more guns than we have people. And the most recently, we're going to hear from Governor Andy Beshear in Kentucky. Just a few words from him, and then we're going to get to Pastor Hall, who's standing by on the line.
Children of God today, one of whom was one of my closest friends. Tommy Elliott helped me build my law career. Helped me become governor, gave me advice on being a good dad. It's one of the people I talk to most in the world, and very rarely are we talking about my job. He was an incredible friend. We also lost Juliana Farmer, Jim Tutt, Josh Barrick, each amazing people whose families grieve them, whose community will mourn and will miss them. These are irreplaceable, amazing individuals that a terrible act of violence tore from all of us. We also pray for our LMPD officer and two others that right now, while perhaps stable, are still fighting for their lives with a need for our care and, yes, for our prayers, because I believe that prayers lift all of us up, and those families would appreciate them. And while I hurt today, and while I will grieve when I'm able, I'm also grateful. I'm grateful for an incredibly quick response from LMPD, the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, Louisville Fire and Rescue, Louisville Metro EMS, getting to this scene in 3 minutes. I'm convinced saved other people's lives, and I know saved 2 other of my friends. One, I received incorrect information this morning I thought was gone, and I'd started to mourn. And now I know he's okay. And one I got to see in the ER, that while it's going to take him a while to heal, it was so good to see my friend, see him there with his wife, and know he is still with us.
So that was Governor Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, talking about our most recent mass shooting there in Kentucky at the bank there. And I think, until you really understand and impacted by this personally, you don't understand, this has been going on. Like I said, in this country, we have more guns than we have people. And doctors have been talking more vocal because the weapons of war that we're seeing, it doesn't matter where you are. The weapons of war and the destruction that it does to the human body, particularly for young people, for children, we're seeing in the schools with places of worship, grocery stores, banks, movie theaters. There is malls. There is no place. We just had a couple of those mass shootings, but shootings in the malls down in Braintree where people down there with guns. No one is safe. So on the line, Pastor Wall, because he's reaching out and he's saying, look, we need to look at our churches and not try to fortify them, because we've always wanted to have an atmosphere of our church to be. It's a sanctuary where we come, the doors are open, all are welcome, all are invited. But in the world we live in, not everyone that comes through there is looking for the God's word or any word except to be violent. So with that said, good morning, Pastor Walt. Thank you, sir, for taking the time out this morning. I know you have a lot going on, and clearly this has been weighing on your heart, is how you can make sure that your worshipers, and not just yours, but those here and locally are safe. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. I feel privileged to be on your broadcast. I listen every single Saturday, and let others call in, but today I decided that it was important that you and I, Pastor Hobbs, and others talk about the active shooter issue that has been seen all over our country. And I'm concerned for our churches, and I'm concerned about the many people who come in on Sundays and Saturdays and weekdays how do we protect them? How do we prepare ourselves for an active shooter's crisis?
Mm-hmm. It was, I believe, it was in South Carolina there, Pastor, when the white supremacists came into the church, while people were having prayer. They were having a meeting, a prayer meeting, and murdered those folks down there in the church. I mean, they welcomed them in to their space.
Right. The only religious organization in our city that I know for a fact is ready happens to be the Nation of Islam. You walk into the Nation of Islam, they not only check your pockets and check your hat and check your hair, they will take the pen out of your pocket to make sure that the pen doesn't have a projectile in it. So they're doing a good job in protecting the guests and members who come to the nation every time they walk in. But as the church, I can only speak for myself, we have not done a good job. Many churches talk about we have a security team, and the security team is usually a group of men and women who put a focus on protecting the pastor. We have to protect the pastor. But my concern is not just the pastor, it's the children that are in that church, the children who leave the sanctuary and go to the bathrooms. The doors are open in our churches for people to come in, but because we have not had, to the best of my knowledge, an active shooter crisis in the city of Boston in recent years, people live like it can never happen here. It can never happen in my church.
Well, to that point, Pastor, I don't know if you recall, a couple of weeks ago, we had what we thought was an active shooter at one of the high schools there over in Charlestown. It was breaking news, and it was also a robocall that went out to several other cities and towns, but we weren't clear on whether or not, and it triggered a response, and you saw officers running around the buildings and locking down businesses and schools because of that. And I think it caught a lot of people because it felt like it came home, right? And luckily it wasn't a real active shooter, but had it been, and we had an active shooter down in the Braintree Mall numerous times, unfortunately.
Numerous times. I don't understand that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, because we live in a free society, and we don't worship in that way, and I think because I've been to and attended services at the mosque, and the women go on one side, the men go on another side. It's very orderly, but everyone is checked. I mean, you can't bring weapons in it. Even as law enforcement, they don't allow you to bring weapons into the building, even though we are licensed to carry and we have a right to carry. But in that's their space. Do we? And I guess, how do we strike a balance, Pastor, of keeping our doors of the churches and religious institutions open, but also dealing in the reality of there's such a level of hatred and against different religions, because we're seeing it in the Jewish community as well, in synagogues. We're seeing it, like I said, in black churches. We're seeing it in schools, in grocery stores, like I said, in movie theaters. No place is immune from this. So is that the reality that we're living in today, that we're even talking about, Pastor? Think about what you're saying here, and what we're talking about is how we prepare for an active shooting in God's temple.
Well, I think
let that set in.
Well, we have to first deal with the denial. And because it hasn't happened in our church and other people's churches in our city, we say it can't happen. Let's focus on something else. I asked myself this question this morning: when was the last time we had a fire drill? We used to have fire drills at our church. How do we get the people out of the church on time, meet at a certain location, make sure that everybody is out to save lives? And again, because we haven't had many fires where people in the churches in recent years had to escape, we're not focused on it. So my thought is, let's focus on it before something happens. And the other thing that a lot of folk have to deal with, a number of the churches have members who are involved in law enforcement. They're law enforcement officers. And so these men and women, to the best of my knowledge, they carry their weapons into the church on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are churches that have men and women who carry weapons when they're counting the money in the counting room.
Mm-hmm.
But again, my focus isn't just protecting the money.
Right.
My focus is
Right.
how do we protect the lives of the children, of the men, of the women that are coming into our churches? How do we gear up and prepare before the crisis?
Yeah.
Because once the crisis takes place, it's too late.
Right. And nothing's absolute, right? No matter what you do, like I said, unless you're just going to lock the doors and then pat everyone down before they walk in, right? Because I know the doors are open. You can open pretty much any door on Sunday in most churches, and the front door at least it's wide open. There's no one there locking the door. People are allowed to come in. That's what church has always been. But also, in a lot of our churches, because unfortunately we don't see a lot of younger people attending anymore.
Right,
the population
right.
is elderly and people
Right.
coming in with their young children. So those are our two most vulnerable populations of people as well.
Right. How do we just change the narrative?
Mm-hmm.
Because can you imagine church folk having to be frisked to the level that they frisk people at the Nation of Islam?
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine how many people would say, "I'm not going to that church," because that's too much of an inconvenience.
Mm-hmm.
That's too much to have somebody putting their hands on me. But you know what? We did it when we were dealing with the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
People, this is the first Sunday in the past 2+ years that we have decided that people can make their own choice whether or not they want to wear the mask.
Mm-hmm.
So we're making that transition. But everybody in our church conformed, even up to last Sunday, to wear the mask. So I think if we begin to explain why you want active shooters training in the churches, not just one church, in the churches,
Mm-hmm.
and we start gearing up and begin to teach people why we need to do this, people will conform. They've already shown us that they will, but we have to put it out there as to why we need something like this.
Right. Well, before we take this call, Pastor, it's not just here. We're look at our schools, right? Where the people are now calling for metal detectors, more so in our school, hardening what we consider soft targets, right? We're coming up to this. This is the 10th anniversary of the bombing of the Boston Marathon, right? 10 years since that's taken place, right? And we've seen a difference in security even at that. And it's very difficult with, in an open society and that many people, you can't stop at all. We know that. We can do the best we can. And the same thing with churches, that you're not going to stop someone who is intent on carrying out, especially if they have the means to do so. And in Boston, like I said, there are no gun stores in the city of Boston that I'm aware of. And yet the number of firearms that we take off of people. But even like last weekend, it was troubling. The 12-year-old that was in his home up in Mattapan, and the bullet came through the window. So it seems like we're not safe anywhere when it comes to the violence, and no one is immune to it. And I'm glad to see and hear that you're taking a realistic approach at the church, because a lot of times we say if we ignore it, it's like it's not happening, right?
It doesn't, right?
It doesn't affect us, right?
It doesn't affect us. And just one other thing, before you take your call, the concern regarding the schools and whether or not we should have metal detectors or we should not, it blows my mind that, to the best of my knowledge, I haven't heard a black elected official say that we need something. Mm-hmm. Most of the black elected officials that I have spoken with or heard from are saying we do not need metal detectors, and neither do we need law enforcement in the schools.
Right.
I disagree with that.
Right.
I believe we need help.
But what you also haven't heard from them, Pastor, is that we should remove them from government buildings like City Hall, right? So that you don't have to pass through one there if it's not needed, right? Because young people pass through there quite often as well, and they don't get exempt from being searched by that metal detector if they go in that building. Right. They have to pass through it. So is it less traumatic if you go to City Hall and go through one? And these kids, you go to the airport, wherever you go now, you get some in government buildings and a lot of publicly. You go to the the Fleet Center. The Celtics
Right.
start their playoffs
Right.
today. No one is
Right.
walking through there without going through a metal detector.
Right.
And they
Right.
screen
Right.
way more people during an event there than you do on a day in any school. The number of people. There are thousands of people, tens of thousands of people that will go to the TD Garden today, and all of them that are guests will go through a metal detector.
Well, I'm not waiting for black elected leaders to lead the charge on the active shooters crisis that could take place in our churches. We, as the members of the churches and pastors and church leaders, we've got to now focus on it before anything happens and prepare ourselves.
All right. Well, stand by, Pastor. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable.
Good morning, y'all. It's Jamal. How you doing?
Good morning, Brother Jamal. How are you, sir? What do you
All
say?
right. And speaking of the Celtics, they need metal detectors these days for the players.
Are you talking about Memphis there?
Yeah, well, there's been a couple of the athletes that got busted with guns, and, in the locker room on the bus, one of them, I remember, shot himself in his hand. That was years ago. I want to say Plaxico or something like that. Whatever. But in any event.
But that was a football player, yeah.
Football player, okay. All right. See, I don't know nothing.
No, it's okay.
So, interesting point. So, Pastor Wall, because of the man that I know you are, right, I know this comes from a good place in your heart. And hearing you speak about it, further talks about that, because you said you were not concerned about the pastor primarily. You said you wasn't concerned about the money in the back primarily. You said you were concerned primarily about what?
The children, the men, the women who come into the institution every week.
But mainly the children, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now here's the thing. We're talking about safety in churches. I hope that you're in communication with the BMA, the 10-point, whatever's existing. Well, I think they merged now, right? But whatever all the other pastors, I hope, are getting on board on this, because, yes, you do need some sort of active shooter, safety, security type of training. So that's great. But that scenario that you're preparing for, while it could happen, has a very small likelihood of happening. Thank goodness, right? But what does happen a lot, and has been happening for decades, that deals with the safety of children, is actually the sexual abuse in the black church. So while I hope that all the churches can come together on this to deal with training to enhance safety in the church, I think the black church in Boston, as I have long been pounding on the drum, needs to come together and discuss past transgressions and a plan moving forward for the safety of children in church and other men and women as it relates to sexual predation, sexual abuse, and things of that nature.
Pastor, you want to comment on
one
that?
of the things, one of the things that I said in this church, I was cracking jokes with my oldest son, who has not been coming to church on a regular basis, and I said, I need you. And I said, I need you in the area of security, because I said, children should not be leaving that sanctuary or leaving a playroom and going to the bathroom by themselves. Number one, that should never happen. There needs to be the security detail that has all this covered. The other thing that I'm hoping that someone like Larry Ellison, who I'm requesting from the city to be the person who facilitates the training and organizes this for the churches, is that we do not have the cameras all over the church where they need to be. We've got to invest the money into cameras, because a lot of that will help the children that are in your churches, that the parents will say, I want to stay here and watch the pastor. Go. You just go. Go to the bathroom. Go. You can't do that. And so that has to be a part of the training also.
Right, and to that point, because I know how cognizant you are of that, because I remember when you guys had the school on the basement level here at the church, the bathrooms down here were off limits to the adults. The only ones that could use that. So you guys were ahead of the times where no adults were even allowed in that space. Now, didn't mean people couldn't wander off in there, but the fact that you were being proactive in that, and that stuck out to me, because a lot of places, the churches and even daycare places that I went into, and even schools, where you had kids and adults in the same space. I'm not saying but it just should not be.
Right. Let me make this last comment because I've got to gather with the men in a few minutes. I say this kind of jokingly. I have my own bathroom that the church built for me. I didn't ask for it, but they did it, and so I have a bathroom. But if I'm downstairs in the studio, I go into the main bathroom. Mm-hmm. If I'm in the bathroom and someone puts their hands on the door, I go, whoa. Only one at a time in here. Right. You can put more than one in there, but right. I simply say, no, mm-hmm. only one at a time here. Mm-hmm. So I'm very conscious about that, and I appreciate you giving me the time. Sure. And Jamal and Larry, I'll continue to talk with you. I look
forward to working with you guys on this.
Okay, thank you.
So Jamal, you're on target there. We had the big scandal in the Catholic Church, right? And people tend to, rather than fix the problem, they write a check, right? And then no one is really held accountable because it's bad press, right? We see it day in and day out. We've seen it in a lot of, inappropriate behavior in our schools with our staff, and it doesn't get reported. And sadly, we're seeing it amongst young people where it's become somewhat normalized that the behavior can't be fixed.
Yeah, and then the way society is charged up. You see the 7-year-old girls doing dances like they're in a strip club.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's just, it's crazy. But I wanted to say this, and I hope Pastor Wall is still listening, and if not, other people. In terms of security cameras, the good news is there's a lot of, because technology has advanced so much, there's a lot of really cheap options. Mm-hmm. So I use a system called Blink, and it's from Amazon, and each camera is only $20. You can get them at Best Buy. You can order them on Amazon, whatever. $20 cameras. The service is $10 a month, and you could add, as many cameras as you want. I have 2 for the front and the back, and there you go. Right. So that's just a simple.
Right, and to that point, Jamal, because there's been such a pushback from law enforcement having cameras in public places, right? And to your point, 20, 30 years ago, it was a luxury. Most businesses had cameras because it was cost prohibitive from homeowners, right? Like you said, $10 was unheard of, right? You're probably starting for something minimal, $3,000 to $5,000 back then. That same system now you can get for $300, a good quality camera system. I know, to your point, I have them in my home, and I was like, wow, this is very affordable even for the average person. But there's been pushback because people say, there's cameras everywhere. Everyone has a camera, and if you have a cell phone, you have a camera, right?
And not for nothing too. With the churches today, I think more the chance of an active shooter, as I said, is slimmer. But what is, I think, more possible is vandalism. Because a lot of these churches, and it could just be some regular hood something with no political intent. Just, the guy who sprays up poopy, whatever his little graffiti name is. Most of them have more respect than to do that to churches, but some do get hit. Yeah. Like, for instance, like I was driving by the other day, Pastor Borders' parking lot up there at Morningstar. Mm-hmm. In the parking lot where he got those big concrete walls. Yeah. That's candy for a graffiti artist, so they don't tag them things all up.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and not for nothing. And if anybody out there has a connect to Pastor Borders, let me connect him to some of the best graffiti artists in the city. If he wants to do a beautiful mural on that wall, we can make that happen. But in any event, so cameras on the outside, even for small stuff like graffiti, or God forbid if somebody comes there and tries to put a fire up, or if you're a synagogue, somebody puts up a swastika or whatever, so the security cameras are good for inside and for outside. And I just wanted to say this about Pastor Wall, because he's funny, talking about the people in the church built a bathroom for him. Mm-hmm. He don't know they did that for them.
Okay, I think there's something to that.
Yeah. You ain't never been in the bathroom after that.
Well, that's why. Is that why you tell? Even in the low one, there's only one at a time. Right?
Yeah. So you can blame him. And then 20 minutes in between each use.
Oh, okay. With proper ventilation, right?
Yep.
So Jamal, I want to continue, but I want to pivot a little bit. I want to get your take. I don't know if you were listening in the 7 o'clock hour talking about city and nonprofits teaming up to tackle violence in Boston. It's sad that we see the warm weather because I think it's tied in, and sure enough, almost on cue, right? The last 2 days of warm weather, the shootings have started. 2 people shot on St. James Street. I know homicide was called out. I'm not sure what the update is on their condition, but it was, like I said, it's almost like forecasting the weather.
Yeah, and so the white guys have a saying: "Sun's out,
guns out." Right? Yeah.
But that's when they're bringing out their wife beater shirts and their cut off T-shirts, and they're talking about their armed guns.
Okay.
Showing their arms. Sun's out, guns out. Okay. But in our community, it means something very different.
Yeah, something more dangerous.
Exactly. And so we talked about this before on one of your shows because I said, hey, prediction.
Yeah.
When the weather gets nice, we're going to start having shooting. So once again, we know what's happening. We know it's happening every year. They're going to roll out something now a couple of weeks before, the shenanigans are in full swing. Novel idea. Look, this time they're doing something different. They're partnering with a nonprofit. That's sarcasm if people can't detect it in my voice. It's the same old each time.
I think they call that insanity, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Exactly. And this one is a study group. I forget where it's from, but another study group from out of town.
Yeah, DC. Yeah, making money. Yeah.
God bless them. I'm sure they do solid work with the data and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But at the end of the day, there is no solution that folks have already not thought of, right? Mm-hmm. The thing is not that we're short on ideas and proposals. The problem with this situation is that folks have not implemented what is out there and what works, and they seem to be literally stuck on stupid and just want to continue this thing that has been proven to not work. And that myth of the Boston Miracle to me is just, it cripples us every time.
But to that point, Jamal, if you in that report there, that article, they said the city wants to reduce homicides by 20% over the next 3 years. Now that sounds like a good, but if I'm a victim of a homicide, see, when I don't like when people put percentages on things of that importance, right? Because when they
make a promise and a pledge, that's just political suicide.
That's my point. And also, I find it disheartening because if you say you have something to decrease it by 20%, why not decrease it by 100%?
Right.
Right? Because that's what my goal would be, not 20%.
Right. If you could do 20, damn it, you could do 40.
Right. Exactly.
And if you could do 40, you could do 60. Come on.
Right. Let's go for the gusto, right? I mean, that's the messages that our intention is to try to reduce it by 100%. 20% is basically saying you've thrown in the towel, that you've given up. You have no realistic, and I know it's not realistic that you're going to stop all violence, but you're basically saying there's a level that's almost tolerated, that's acceptable.
Here's to me a bigger problem than that. It's once again the players that they choose to do this, because everybody in the hood. I mean, and I hate to say it like this, but we got to keep it. There are certain people who they put up front. Okay, look. If I own a big restaurant, right, and I have service staff, and I know I got my service guy over here, Bob, but Bob is a bit mouthy, and he has a bad attitude, right? I got Sylvia over here. She's a bit mouthy and got a bad attitude. Well, guess what? Bob and Sylvia don't work the front of the room.
Right.
Okay? Because I know that their interactions with customers in the past have been problematic, right? Not good for business, messes up the reputation of our establishment. So after these problems have been identified, I would be a fool to put them back in that position to continue messing up. Okay. City of Boston continues to put up the same players that they have been told time and time again, we don't want them. We don't like them. We don't trust them.
Wow.
And then they be like, well, this is what we're using. So, to me, God bless Reverend Jeffrey Brown. We worked together on the Boston Police Reform Task Force and whatnot. God bless. But there are very many problems with his career over the years as it relates to violence his relationship to the community, and da-da-da-da. I shouldn't really have to tell anybody about it because everybody knows, right? And then in that photo op, the other person they had up there was James Hills. Now, that's just cuckoo cray.
Okay.
Okay? I mean, as I've described him before, and I'll say this publicly, I have no problem, because once again, I'm not, I don't call people names or whatever, but what I'm using is a descriptor of the public persona. And I have called James Hills the silliest man in Boston. It's just silly. Giggling and, finding light in subjects and, and then this persona now is a podcaster and, having conversations that are way above the pay grade. I don't understand how people, is that what it is? He got prominence because he's a podcaster, and now this gives him some sort of mystic ability, like it does the clergy, to handle all. I'm a podcaster, therefore I can perform brain surgery, because I had on a brain surgeon last week.
Right, Jamal, stand by for a second. You're listening to At the Round Table with Ma'am Neal. The calling number here is 617-282-0685. 617-282-0685. Jamal, to your point, and like I said, they don't have to call me, but the fact that people like you and I are not invited to this dialogue, and like I tell people, what you said has been articulated to me in so many times with people, is that they don't trust these people, and they don't know these people, right? You just can't thrust people in there and say, oh, because they're young, they're new, they're innovative. Look, you need some wisdom. You need people who have some concept of what they're talking about. And when you're talking to people who, as I was saying earlier, who have more years in their work than these people have on this earth, and you're calling them senior advisors, that says it all. I'm not saying they don't have anything to bring to the table, but what they have is an appetizer, not an entree.
Yeah, you got to be able to communicate to the streets at the end of the day. And this was my whole thing with the clergy. As I've teased Pastor Wall about before, because, he used to be in a gang back in the day. And back in his day, literally on some crossing the switchblade type of stuff, he was in there, they were beefing with chains and, you know what I mean? They were primitive gang beef, you know what I mean? And of course, by the time when I'm coming up, it's all 9mm and Uzis and all this, right? Now these kids got the stuff that got, 100 in the drum and all this type of stuff, So times, they are a-changing, right?
Yeah.
And so the point is, by the time I was a young dude, Pastor Wall and them couldn't really talk to me about violence in the street because, y'all used to be street active, but you were banging with chains. Like, we do way different. Y'all didn't have no money back then. We got money, thousands of dollars. You know what I mean? So things have changed. And now, for some of them same people, like, let's take a Reverend Brown. I don't know when or if he was ever street active. I know he pins on his laurels the whole Boston Miracle situation. That was the 80s. I was a kid in the Boston Miracle. And I could tell you back then, one of the beefs is, I never seen him in all these places that he said he was at. I was on Humboldt damn near every day. I never seen these people. Okay? Including the church that was a block down the street. Never seen him. Okay? So from that time, we never believed it. And now here you got some of these same people who I would say didn't have a connection to the street back then, and they're still living off this perceived connection to the street. Now, James Hills, of course, another thing. Let's say you could get 100 of the livest action cats in the city of Boston from the ages of 30 to 15, the shooters, the problem kids. You could get them all in a room. You get them down there at the Reggie Lewis Center or something, right? And then here you come in to talk to him, James Hills.
So
how's that gonna go?
So Jamal, you think is that intentional? Because right, because you don't want to bring people in who are going to tell the truth. Because in that article, I don't know if you've read it yet, there were some people in there who were saying they got nothing out of it. As a matter of fact, I was at the meeting, that regular library meeting on Friday, which I attend for work. And the mayor was there at this one, and they were talking about what took place at that 3-day conference. And the truth tellers were in the room, whether you like. And I was like, see, they're telling the truth about this, and it was almost like they wanted this to be a coronation. And when these folks got up and said, "Hey, there's nothing I learned here. This is all BS," and they almost wanted to like, wow, that's not what we're here to just kumbaya. And I was glad that those people spoke out in the way they did, because that's how I feel a lot of times when when I attend these things. It's a coronation, like they were singing people's praises, and I'm like, is this a roast, or are we here? Because honestly, I don't see the progress from these meetings. I just see, like they have a trying to come up with a summer plan, and I'm like, see, a summer plan? We don't have a plan for all year round. We are 400 officers short. That's no secret. You saw several stories in this past week, so it's not like I'm like the guy that's giving away military secrets, right? This is no secret, and criminals know that, and the public knows that, right? So people are, in some ways, there's less law enforcement to respond to these things, let alone people saying, oh, we don't want the police around. Guess what? Not many of us are around, and we're leaving in droves. And so the people who are going to pay a price for that are the ones in these communities where this is happening. Like yesterday, the last couple of days were extremely unusual for this time of the year. And I went home, my wife, we're out in the backyard, and we go grab some dinner, and the furthest thing from my mind is violence. Not saying it can't take place, but I would not bring my family into certain neighborhoods, sadly, that I grew up in, wondering, like with that young man in his house last weekend with his family, not doing anything, that gets hit with a round, and his sister almost gets hit up there on Cummins Highway. That's not normal, and we just kind of shake it off and shrug it off. So is it us, or is it, and then we have our elected officials who claim they have the answers to these problems. Then when they get in there, all of a sudden, it's not as easy, and now they want to push back on those of us who are saying, well, this is what you signed up for.
Yeah, it's a problem. And one thing that the city of Boston, and particularly through my years of activism, Boston Police Department, don't do well is take criticism.
Hello.
and I always used to use this as an analogy, which is corporations.
Huh?
McDonald's, over 1 billion people served, but they still do focus groups.
That's right.
And they have people who come in that they pay to tell them not their burger is the best thing ever.
Why do you think the McRib is not on the menu and won't be coming back? Because people
there
are smoking,
go.
Right?
There you go. So they have people that come in and tell them not what's great about their product, but what thinks about their product.
Right.
So that then they can either make it better or decide to, in the case of the McRib, eliminate it from the menu.
Right.
And so the city of Boston doesn't do that. And to your point about that meeting, oftentimes, yes, it's something, hey, we just did this great thing, or we did something that we thought was great, and now here's the public meeting so you can tell us how great it was too.
Right, exactly, exactly, Jamal. All right,
oftentimes it don't go that way.
Nope.
Like Elizabeth Warren just came the other day.
Oh my God! Tell me, I saw that flyer. I'm like, oh, it's election year. She just announced she's running. Now she's gonna come back and visit Roxbury.
Yeah. And most people saw it the day before it happened. Those who are politically astute as myself saw it as a piggybacking off of Mel King's funeral. Okay, because everybody was in town, so it's easy to get Michelle Wu, Maura Healey, Ayanna. Everybody's here, right?
Right. It's a campaign kickoff for her, right?
A campaign kickoff off of the back of Mel King, blah, blah, blah. And, a lot of this conversation, too, about what will Mel do and all this, oh, my goodness. It's really disgusting. I find it disgusting.
I saw it. See, you get the same reaction from this stuff that I do, but most of our folks are just happy to be in a room with people like that.
Oh, exactly. Well, she got, I think the papers even put it out, but yeah, that meeting was a little bumpy. A couple of hecklers, some white people didn't look like they were from here, talking about Ukraine and some other global issues. They got kicked out, and then some other people in the audience that we know gave her a hard way to go as well. So, she was expecting to come in, and just do her little Elizabeth Warren thing.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, everybody ain't happy, lady.
Well, that's what I'm saying, Jamal. Is that but then they feel like, well, why are you so angry, or why are you feeling that way towards me? Like I said, when's the last time that you weren't running for office that you've been to Roxbury?
Right.
Right. in dealing with our real issues here, right? You're not. You're not. I mean, because it showed me her lack of interest. That's why I said, you lose me when you're in office and you run for something else, and now this is by default, you right, that you get, because you wanted to be president and that wasn't accessible to you, so now you want to be senator again. No, you've lost interest in it. Clearly that's not what you wanted to do, right? So move on.
And not for nothing too, remember, these are the people who endorsed Miss Monica Cannon Grant as our appointed black leader.
I'm sure she didn't talk about that. None of them run from that like the plague.
So, for instance, to the point of what we were just talking about before, with the people that people are picked, right? So, how is it that somebody like that could get picked with all that rhetoric and that filth talk and all that, and they say, "Oh, that's the person that we want to focus on. That's the person we want to elevate." And then, meanwhile, all of the people who have done good work over the years, I guess our phones don't work. They can't find us. Right?
What they say, if the phone isn't ringing, it's them calling.
Exactly. And it's crazy because I had a conversation with Joe Kennedy when he was running, and he was so close with Monica. And I warned him. And I was like, hey, Mr. Kennedy, I'm just telling you this because, I don't really, I'm not enamored by you. I'm not like a celebrity thing. But I will tell you that my grandparents knew your uncles. And they used to, on the vineyard and all that type of stuff. Like when the Kennedys went smoozing with the blacks, to the little jazz clubs or the thing, So my people was in that little circle. Back in the days when like Senator Ed Brooke was around and all that, right? Mm-hmm. So I told him, our families, had that thing. I said, and just for that, I'm going to put you on. I said, you need to be very careful with that lady, and you need to keep your distance. She's bad news. She's doing this. She's doing that. And he just didn't listen. Boy. When that news broke, first, before that, he had to distance himself because, of the comments she made against that other lady, the racist comments, right? And I was calling him back. Then he lost the campaign. Then I was calling that man back. The man has never returned my phone call to this day. And I'm like, wow, bro. And I tried to help you, man. I tried to help you.
But what part of that surprised you?
Well, I thought that it's difficult when somebody tells you something crazy about somebody that you might like. So I get the initial thing. But after everything came true, I figured that he would be a stand-up guy. Because we had a little intimate conversation there for a hot minute. And I really figured on a stand-up guy thing that he would call back and be like, yo, you know what? Thank you. And my calls to him was like, hey, I told you at the time, I want to do some work together. So you really want to do some work in the community, we can do some serious things, right? And so I really expected that I would get a call back, but I didn't.
Well, but since, Jamal, like I said, I've said this to many people at times. I tell them when they come to me about issues, and I say, you don't want my opinion, you want my approval, and they're two different things, right? And so I'm not going to echo what you want. If you want that, get you something that echoes it back to you. But if you're asking me for my honest opinion, that's what I'm going to give you. Don't ask me if you don't want the truth. And I think, like I said, a lot of these things are set up to say we're doing something. And so when it comes down, look, well, we have these task forces, we have these meetings. And I tell you, Jamal, I've been to numerous of them and I don't see anything out of it. I was at one recently, like I said, the one up in Common Square. I'm just sitting here laughing. I'm like, this is what it feels like to be at a Jerry Springer in the Jerry Springer audience, because there was, like, it's election year, so most of the councils they're up there on their phones. They're like, oh, we got to get out here so we can keep our job, our 6-figure jobs, and keep voting ourselves pay raises. But as far as real issues, when it comes to crime, when it comes to our schools, when it comes to affordable housing, I'm not talking about public housing, I'm talking about affordable housing, right, where people are homeowners, and that's been the problem. I said most of the folks here are renters. The ones who are in that conveying are renters, right? So they have no say, and these properties are being sold. A lot of them being torn down. I'm watching these monstrosities being built on where there was a 3-family house. And I'm amazed at how they fit it in that structure. I mean, on little corner lots, right? And God forbid, as I've been developed, if I applied to do that same thing, like I said, the pushback we've been getting at Manly, and I know you've been trying to help us with that, of trying to put in real affordable housing for our people in the community, and we can't get any real support from the city. So I know the truth from fiction.
Yeah.
This is crazy, and we're not making any strides. You go down to Mass and Cass, it's disgraceful what's taking place down there. The open air. I mean, that was not tolerant. I'm not saying you lock all, but I mean, what's to encourage a business to come down there? I mean, I don't even go shopping in there.
Not for nothing. I'm saying lock all the people up. And see, people don't know. And when it comes down to it, I'm a liberal conservative, if that makes sense.
But see, I don't think anyone has a title on right and wrong, right? So that's what I'm saying. So, you're in one column or the other. You see that as being wrong. You see that as being criminal, right? And
right. And it's like, I'm not this heavy police person.
No.
I'm also like, people shouldn't be urinating, shooting heroin,
right,
and going to the bathroom number 2 on the sidewalk,
right,
all at the same time.
Right.
What I mean? That should be, frowned upon.
Or walking into a business, right, and taking whatever you want as if you paid for it.
Right. And also, too, what I really feel bad for, too, another thing is, like, because obviously homelessness is crazy, and in particularly when it's like, when it gets cold, it's really crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of people who are sleeping inside the ATMs and stuff like this.
Yep, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because now imagine if you're a woman at 12 o'clock at night who needs to go to the ATM, and there's a guy in there sleeping on the floor.
You ain't going in there? Even a guy probably ain't going in there.
Right. Smelling like all of Simcoe's fish grease.
No, that was Simcoe's grease. Would be an improvement. Would be an improvement. But you're right, and then see, now the bank is looked at as a bad person if they remove them out of there and evict them out of that space, right? Because
and some people say, well, get them help, give them a place to sleep. I've been on them campaigns, and some of these people will tell you, man, get your away from me.
Right.
I ain't going to no shelter.
Right.
And why? Because the shelter got rules.
Right.
Or two, also another fun fact, all shelters ain't a nice place to go. So some of these people feel like they're safer on the street than they're in the shelter.
But to your point as well, the shelter's not letting them bring all of that stuff in there because a lot of it, we don't know whether it has lice or mite or whatever, bed bugs. So they're not allowing you to bring all that in, and people are very possessive about their things, their property.
And you sure can't bring in your liquor,
right? Or your knives or your drugs,
right?
It's not a hotel, but I mean, it's really sad driving through there. I drove through there the other day, and I'm like, wow.
That side street is crazy.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But it's now coming back out onto the main street because it's overflowing down there, right? And the weather's gotten nicer, so even some of these folks who might have sought shelter, the nights aren't as cold. The days, the last few days have been nice, and it's open season again down there. And so and people don't pay as much attention, but there's been a lot of violence and quite a few homicides that have taken place down there, and stabbings, because everyone down there has got a knife.
Not to mention too the ODs now with this the new stuff. The fentanyl wasn't enough. Now they got the fentanyl with the trank in it, the animal tranquilizer.
Wow.
You heard about that, right?
No, I didn't.
Okay, yeah. So there's a new drug on the street, and it's basically the fentanyl is now mixed with some particular animal tranquilizer. I forget the chemical name, but this takes you out of here. And then of course, once one fiend overdoses or something, then all the other fiends is like, what's that one? Give me that one. Yeah. So it's on the streets a lot now. I think there's already been like 4 or 5 overdoses, and it ain't been really hit the streets here in Boston for more than a week or 2.
Wow. I know recently they had a couple of overdoses up in Dorchester. There, 3 people, 2 of them were deceased upon arrival. And what I'm seeing is also alarming, Jamal, as you've seen, is our young kids are getting a hold of edibles and stuff, and people understand, well, it's just marijuana. I'm like, no, their system is not set up. That, I talked to EMTs and doctors about this, and they said the amount that an adult can consume will kill a child. It's toxic to their system. And we just, I don't know why we just don't pay attention to things that should matter. That our kids are in school eating drugs, candy bars, like it's a Mr. Good bar.
Well, let me tell you too. The problem with edibles, as a cannabis consumer and somewhat of an expert, dare I say, the problem too now is that all edibles are not just made from the dispensary. There's machines where you can infuse and make your own gummies and your own oils or whatever. And so the problem with that is if the kids are getting hold of something that didn't come straight from the dispensary, which is already high potency, the homemade stuff, because now, the liquor store is only going to sell you regular liquor, 40 proof. Right. If I'm making it at home, I can make me some moonshine.
That's what I'm saying. They don't have a distillery in the basement, right? Bootmaking, right. Exactly. Right. It's been regulated.
And not for nothing, if they make a nip ban, I told the people, so mark my words, because I told them this about cigarettes and they did not listen. If they ban nips, first of all, people are just going to buy quarter pints, which, for those that don't know, is just 2 nips. If they ban quarter pints, then people are just going to get a half pint, which is 2 quarter pints. They ban half pints, then people will just get the pint. Okay, a whole pint of whatever, if you drink it cheap, it's probably $6 or $7. Okay, right. Now if they get rid of all pints, you will see people down Dudley, just like now they're selling cigarettes with a big bottle of Hennessy or whatever and little cups, and you'll be able to come up and they'll be giving you shots right there on the corner, just like they're giving single cigarettes or cigarette packs.
Right, but I think even taking it a step further, Jamal, I think you'll see them crossing the border, right, or going into other parts of the state that don't ban them, buying them there and coming back and selling them for more, right? Because there's a market. Like a lot of these folks go up to New Hampshire because you can't buy them here. And they go up to New Hampshire to buy the menthols, and they come back here. You've created a market for it.
And meanwhile, giving all that tax money to New Hampshire.
Right,
because they still buying them legally in New Hampshire.
That's right.
So now New Hampshire gets all that tax money. Their cigarette industry probably boost up whatever by a verifiable perspective. Right. And then they're bringing them back here, selling them illegally for a markup.
Yeah.
Well, now you've not only created an underground economy for the black market, but you also created a sure thing for New Hampshire.
Right. So Jamal, we've got about 2 minutes. So to your point there, remember when they voted in the legislators passed in to put a tax on alcohol, another tax on there, and people started driving up to New Hampshire to get their liquor, right? And then it was repealed because they're like, hey, we're losing our tax base, right? People are buying it elsewhere.
Okay. Absolutely.
All right, stand by for a second. We got about a minute. Go ahead, Rose. We got 2 minutes. I'm going to give you a minute quickly.
No, I was just going to say, when you outlaw something, when you ban something, you're just creating a black market.
Right.
So, like, you ban the thing, because people are just going to find a way, because you're not going to curb the behavior. The behavior is still going to happen. It's just going to happen behind closed doors.
Exactly.
Or in secrecy, clandestinely.
No, that's you're absolutely right. Like I said, I drive down there, I'm in an unmarked car. People are approaching me, not knowing on the police want to sell me cigarettes. I don't even smoke, but I just laugh. I'm like, and I keep moving. I keep moving because I'm like, what am I going to do, right? I mean, the courts don't even want to entertain this, so you basically legitimized it without legitimizing it. Just like the open air down there with the drug use, you've legitimized it. Do you have police cars down there with blue lights flashing, and people go lean up against the cruiser and inject? So we're creating this monster and this genie. We don't know how to get it back into the bottle.
So wait, if they're injecting right there in front of the cruiser, you can't arrest them for?
Well, you could, but we know that they don't see it as that. So the courts don't really want to entertain it. So you just you kind of turn your head some ways, because the reality is that no one wants to deal with it, and you arresting them and bringing them in the station to get sick is not helping the situation. Gentlemen, we got to fly. It's the top of the hour. Jamal, thank you, sir. I will see you at our usual time. Rose, thank you. I will be in touch with you soon to finalize that date with you as well. All right, folks, we've been listening to At the Round Table with Ma'am Lil. We're going to take a break and we'll be back.
The chance to meet ya. No, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog.
I wrote 300 songs in 1 year. Boogie will tell you I'm on it.
I got unreleased songs for days, they don't want it. Eat any MC in the game. It ain't a challenge if your music reflects who you are.